now. And I will say welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody for our Women's Club Book Club discussion. And today is a traditional book club discussion. We're going to be talking about Elizabeth Strout's novel, My Name is Lucy Barton. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it as per usual because I want to hear what you all have to say. And I know that Carol has to leave early. But it's a fast read, I know. Well, for some of us and for others, it always depends on our mood. But I know that Carol Blank read it last night in like a period of hours because I didn't give her the book until yesterday. And it's
cannot get the sound. The meeting.
And it's a quiet book. It's a slow, quiet book, but it's at the same time it's an interesting sort of. It's interesting that it's a quiet book because so much of the story takes place in the things that aren't said, in these silences that happen in between things. And it's also interesting in the way that it deals with time. So all the action of the book really it takes place over 5 days. But at the same time, the stories, everything that we're hearing about is taking place over years and years and years. So we have this interplay of time. We have an interplay of like the function of memory, of our relationships with other people, of the unreliability of memory and emotion, class divides. So basically, I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna open it up right away because there's so much to be able to talk about in this tiny little book. And I'm very curious to see what you all have to say. Carol, yes.
You mentioned memory, which is really very interesting because the woman who she admired, the teacher, the one whose lecture she went to, said you can only write your story once. And I find that if I think back over my childhood and things, my memory changes. So I could write my story more than once because as she had, was it memory? Was it her mother? Memory isn't always the same, I don't think. So I think we can write more than once the same story. So
I agree. I don't think that she would disagree about that. I think that what they say is you only have one story, but there are so many different ways to tell that story.
Right.
Or like different aspects to focus on.
I thought she meant you have only one life, actually. I really thought one life. She used the word story, but you only have one life. You only live once, and you live with and then whatever interpretations you have, that's something else. But I got the impression it was only one life. We all live.
And as you get older, Roseanne, don't you think as you get older, you look back and you interpret it differently? You see it
but
through.
You still only live one life. Yeah, but you only have one life to tell. Whether it be at 40, at 50, at 2, memories of that one life. That's you don't only have that. You only have that one life. It's not like a fictional writer that can change the whole story.
But at the same time, the story does change, right? Like depending on our perspectives. So in the same way that we can look back on our lives and have one interpretation, like we have the benefit of hindsight when we're looking back at things. We are stuck in the present and with the emotions that are influencing the way that we act, the way that we see the way that others act.
You can't change the ending. You can't change the ending, and you can't.
It's not about that though. It's about changing our understandings.
That's for sure. I found I didn't understand. I couldn't figure out. Are they abusive parent? I mean, they I wasn't sure. They're so abusive, and then her mother was so uncommunicative and down, and then she loved her mother because it's true. There you see kids who love their parents, and I had experience with that. I saw somebody their mother treated like shit, and they loved their mother when to deathbed. That's when they first met after 30 years. But still, I couldn't understand. Was she abused? What a horrible life. I didn't understand. I couldn't figure that out.
Well, she says the same thing, right? Like she says the same thing at one point. She's walking down the street and she says, sometimes I think back and I think, oh, it wasn't so bad. It wasn't really so bad. And then other times, something about the sky in November, she says, and she's just filled with this gulf of emptiness. And so then she
Yeah,
has to go into
right.
and talk to someone. And so she has that same question, was she abused? Like they talk about how sort of just how violently they were hit, right? She talks about how like she and her sister and brother were beaten growing up. She talks about being locked in the truck. Clearly, love is not necessarily a shared understanding between the parents and the children, like of what love is, of what that means. But she has the same questions. Was she abused or was she
She
not?
didn't see her parents for 9 years. I mean, what does that tell you?
What was that?
Longer.
What
Your
did she
mother
say?
for 9 years.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
hear
right.
what
Same
she
thing.
said.
That she didn't
She
see her
hadn't seen her
parents
mother in
for
9 years.
she didn't see her mother for 9 years
Mother.
between the time of her hospital, the time that her mom came and visited her in the hospital, and then when she went back to see her mother on her deathbed.
Hi, Katie. I'm in late. Can you hear? Can you see me?
I can't see you, Rona, but I can hear you.
Why can't you see me? What do I have to do here?
It looks like I see the ceiling or a piece of
That's right.
paper or
Oh,
something.
you know what? That's it. Sorry.
There you are.
Here's my old face. That's it. Okay.
Oh, you're
Sorry.
pulling a Carol, Rona. I
everybody.
can only see the top of your forehead.
Well, that's the only good thing to see, actually. Can I just introduce? I'm sorry, everybody. I was a little late. I just want to welcome Phyllis. Phyllis is a lovely lady in my building, and I told her how great all you ladies were. So welcome, Phyllis.
Yes.
She's such a
Welcome,
liar.
Phyllis. I said hello earlier, and I thought that she was maybe just shy, so I didn't want to poke her too much.
She has a
I
nice
told her
ceiling
all about
also.
you.
Good ceiling,
So,
Phyllis.
discussing the book,
Carol,
I
I
loved
see your
it.
face. Look at Carol. Phyllis, take a look at Carol's face. You're not going to see it too often.
Smarty pants.
Where is she? Where's Carol?
It's because I haven't done a gym class all week.
There she is.
Weeks or whatever. That's why.
So you didn't have to stand up.
Carol, thank you for amazing, beautiful creatures. I listened to the book club yesterday, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, good. Okay. I
Not
looked
as
for
good
you
as
there.
you, Katie, but nobody's as good as you, Katie. But that's beside the point.
But totally different approaches, you know?
I love the
It is.
validation.
Her approach, she's lovely, Kathy Diamond. I love her. But her approach is just to sit for an hour and talk about the book. I don't find there's a lot of participation. At the end, there is.
Yeah.
But she's still excellent too.
Yeah,
It
so
was
that's
excellent.
what you guys are going to get from me, those of you who are coming to the in-person Women's Club meeting next week. I'm going to come and speak, and I'm going to do a book review. So that's going to be just me talking. And actually, you guys who do come, you're getting kind of this is the deep dive versus next week's, which is going to be an overall general, because you've inspired me. And next week I'm going to review Elizabeth Strout's kind of series on Lucy Barton.
My sister told me. She said she's written so many different books.
She's written so many different books, but she's written 4 books in the Lucy Barton sort of world. So I'll talk about all 4 of them. So this is the deep dive into My Name is Lucy Barton. And then next week at the in-person.
Where and when, Katie? You'll let us know where?
It's at the Aquatic Center, I believe, on Wednesday at 1:30, if I'm not mistaken. I know Ronna Lee will send out an email about it. And she's waiting for me to send her a blurb about myself and the books, which I haven't done yet. Sorry.
That's too boring. Boring.
Oh, I
We
look
know ya.
forward to that because I heard all her books about Lucy Barton are wonderful. My sister told me there was a series, and I love this. I love the way she writes.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll shut up now.
No, don't shut up. What did you what do you love? What did you love about it? This is the whole point.
You know what I got from it? The mother, you know what I got from it? I read it a while ago, so I was frantically trying to just, you forget. But I do remember the mother-daughter complicated relationship. That's
Mhm.
exactly what came out of it. And I thought, my goodness, all of us. And her mother was still alive. And usually when you have the complicated relationship and you regret and you wish you could say and you wish you could do that, when your parent isn't here anymore. But even though she was, that's really what I took out of it, the mother-daughter complicated regrets, why relationship. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way.
Oh, I think probably. Yes.
I didn't know what the relationship. They hardly had any relationship.
But
I
why?
mean, she was
I
locked in the
understand
truck, then
that.
she got her out of the truck. I didn't find it very much.
But why was her mother like that? And why was the relationship? And
What?
how could
I
she
didn't hear.
not be upset about it and resent? Well, she did. That did come through. But you're right. But I just, it got me thinking of mother-daughter relationships, of my mother-daughter relationship, my daughter and myself. I don't know if you all felt that way, but I that really came through to me in this book.
Oh,
Her
100%.
tongue all the
100%,
time.
Rona.
She
Yeah.
bit her tongue. She didn't, she wanted to say things. She started to say things. And then when it looked like it was upsetting her mother, she pulled back and apologized.
Exactly. Excellent point. That's such an excellent point. Do mothers do that? Do mothers have regret? And what did I do wrong? I don't want to know. Don't tell me, like what, you don't want to know. You want to think you did everything right. That was very, very interesting. Is that what she writes about, Katie, in her other books too? Is it similar to relationships between parents and children or no?
Not always. Some of them, like it's an element, but I mean, I think that as much as we already talked a little bit about this advice from Sarah Payne, that the author who's sort of her mentor, that
Right.
you're only going to have one story, and then like the different ways to tell. I don't think of Elizabeth Strout as, or I don't know what her one story is, I guess is what I'd say. I don't
Right.
know that it's just like I wouldn't even say that this book is only about mother-daughter relationship. Like it's about mother-daughter relationships. Of course, that's an element to it. It talks about like her relationship. Well, it doesn't talk really about her relationship with her mother and her relationship with her two daughters. But we see
Which
that
says
contrast.
Says a lot in itself.
And we see the contrast between the ways that her mother was with her, the way that she is with her daughters, which I think everyone, when they raise children, if they raise children, then have that, right? We try and take the good thing from the ways that we were brought up, and we try to learn from the things that we thought were bad and change those the way that we bring up our children. Our children will do the same thing. Nobody's
She abandoned her
perfect.
children. She abandoned her children.
Who did?
She didn't. The children live with the husband.
The children, while
Her
she's in the
children.
hospital. While
No,
she's in the
yeah, but
hospital
when
for
she got
9 weeks?
divorced, her children live with the husband. It says very clearly she left the house and the kids and everything to him. And then she went off on her life. So that's it was one little sentence.
You know what?
Said, okay.
As married to a lawyer, that's what happens legally. If whoever abandons the family residence and leaves,
right.
the other parent gets custody
correct.
of it. That's what
right.
happens legally.
But I didn't get the sense at all that she abandoned her children. She talks also about when they're older and time spent with them.
But I'm
she
saying
talks
that
very
they weren't
clearly
children
about
anymore. They weren't children. They were, but they were children. When she got divorced from her husband, she walked out and left them.
But she and her husband didn't get divorced for years later. This is one of the hard things to try and keep in mind with the timeline, with the way that the story is told too, right? Is that while so much of the action is taking place, her kids are 5 and 6. But then she's telling the story from the future right? When she's remarried, William's remarried, the children are grown. She talks about having left it, like, but all of those things happen later. Like,
Yeah, but she says she rented an apartment always with a room for the kids to sleep in, and they never came.
mhm.
What does that tell you? She said that.
Yeah, you're right. She did. She definitely did.
But that they
Um,
never came, does that mean that she abandoned them?
No, but they talked about the stepmother.
Mm-hmm.
They seemed to like the stepmother, and they sort of didn't involve themselves with her life that much.
But
So
that's, and so this comes up a little bit later on in these other books too. Just to, I'm not gonna,
Oh.
I'm not gonna.
is this autobiographical? Do we know
I,
anything?
it reads like it's autobiographical, doesn't it? I don't think so. I don't think so. She grew up differently. So Elizabeth Strout is from Maine. Well, I mean, that doesn't say things one thing or the other. Elizabeth Strout is from Maine. The main character here, Lucy Barton, is from Illinois. And she grew up, while she grew up not wealthy, and she spent a lot of time in nature, all the interviews with the author only have very like it seems like she grew up in a very love-filled, non-doubting sort of,
Sorry.
she never doubted her family's love for her, or and she grew up alongside, she had a close relationship with her brother, is what it sounds like from interviews. I don't know because I don't know the woman. But this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but whether or not it's autobiographical. So, of course, Sarah Payne also talks a lot about um, your views and your characters' views will get confused for each other from, right? Do you guys remember that part at one of Sarah Payne's lectures? And it's true that it's hard as a reader to not sort of conflate the two, right? I mean, she's a writer. Our main character is a writer. I think Phyllis is having some trouble with her sound as well. This is,
Oh, I don't see her anymore.
well, she
Actually.
left and came back. Sorry to interrupt
Okay.
myself. Phyllis is connecting to audio, is what it says, and I hope that she's able to connect. That's
I
there
see
does
her
seem,
now. I see her. Yeah.
and it looks like everything's connected. Oh, connecting to audio again. Connecting. I don't know if it's working, but um, yeah, like there are some similarities between our main character and the author, right? They're both authors. Both have, had kind of slower success, whatever. But when I first read the book, I had this image of what Sarah Payne looked like in my head. And then after I did my first book club with this and I looked into a little bit more, I saw a picture of the author, and she looks almost identical to how I imagined Sarah Payne.
Really.
Now, that was years
Okay.
ago. And so now I'm not sure, talking about the unreliability of memory,
Yeah.
if I had ever seen a picture of her before, if that's why I imagined Sarah Payne that way. But that's sort of, I'm getting off topic in terms of answering your question, Rona. I know you, I'm coming back. Okay. You asked if this
No,
is what all
yeah,
of her
no, it's
books are.
okay. Yeah, exactly. But you know what else I just thought of? How common is it for an author to be so transparent, like to put themselves into their character and show everybody who they really are? That has to be a very rare and brave thing to do for an author.
Well, I would imagine, but I mean, again, I don't think that that's necessarily what she's doing here. I, I think that when I think of an author who I think, and again, I don't know, but who I think of as writing more like thinly veiled autobiography is John Irving. So
Uh-huh.
that quote of "there's only one story to tell," I think when I was in my 20s, I read probably 4 or 5 John Irving novels in a row. And I was just like, it's the same character. It's the same
Uh-huh.
character. It's a coming of age story about a boy who's a wrestler who, finds, self-assurance, in his sports ability, who has a strained relationship with his mother. And that was like every character. I was just like, okay. Like after I think the third or fourth one, I was like, okay, I can set that aside for right now. But at the same time, this is it. They're not the same story. They're different ways of approaching. So when the way that I interpret, which is not to say that is the correct way, it's at all. It's just that we all have different ways of seeing that whole there's only one story to tell. Like I like Roseanne's interpretation that it's like we have one life to live. That's true. Now we can focus on different sections of that life. We can explore it, like, but also there is the benefit of hindsight. So again, I think we've talked before about reading, like reading the same novel at different points in our lives, right? And you see different things. You recognize that it's about, it might be about something, turn out to be about something that you had no idea.
Is that
what
because
it
of our
was.
life experience? Is that because of our life experiences as we get older?
I think so. I mean,
That's an interesting point.
I mean, I use the example a lot of the times about, for myself, reading two different people. I'll say Shakespeare and Alice Munro. So William Shakespeare, when I first read my first Shakespeare play, I hated it so much. I hated it so much. I was just like, but everyone's so stupid. They're idiots. They make the wrong decisions all the time.
Like Wuthering Heights, Katie, like Wuthering Heights. How I
right?
Who told me
But
to read Wuthering Heights? It was somebody there.
it was me.
It was you.
But this is it, is that with William Shakespeare, the reason why his characters are so stupid, and also the reason why he is still read today and appreciated, is because people are stupid. What he does is he illuminates the human condition, which as you get older, you can see that more. But when I was 14, I didn't see it. Now, Alice Munro, similar but different. So she writes, or she wrote short stories set in small towns in Canada. She's like won a bazillion prizes, part of the Canadian canon, et cetera, et cetera. And I was reading her when I was about 20, and I hated her. I was like, nothing happens. Who cares? And then one of my professors at the time, he knew that I liked Anton Chekhov because I was, what's the word? Pretentious. So he said,
a book of your life, Katie.
he said, you can't like Chekhov and not like Alice Munro. And I said, well, I can because I do. And I don't. But then again, as I got older and I revisited Alice Munro's writing, I actually see a lot of similarities to like this book, to in particular, like not necessarily all of Elizabeth Strout's writing, but like that kind of quietness, these small moments that are being illuminated, that it's like, what's happening in between? And again, as a 20-year-old who very immature and whatever, like I couldn't see that, and I didn't have enough life experience to see what depths were in her writing, Alice Munro's writing. And in the same way with Lucy Barton, with My Name is Lucy Barton, I find that when I say a lot takes place within the silences, part of that is spoken about, right? Like, so like one of the things she says, we're talking about Lucy's relationship with her mother. And she says, there was one scene where her mother is talking, her mom never sleeps, right? While she's there, she's just taking, like, every now and again, she'll close her eyes and have a cat nap. And so this is it. So Lucy says, like, how can you do that? And her mother says something like, it's something you learn to do when you don't feel safe. And Lucy Barton's response to that is, I did not know a lot about my mother's childhood, or I did not know anything about my mother's childhood. And this is partly what keeps coming up over and over and over again in here is that what's happening in the silences? What are the things that we don't know? What are the things like, what is the brother's fascination with Little House on the Prairie? What does that give him?
The other books about the brother, I find the brother very interesting. They don't talk about him very much, but that was Jeremy, right?
No, Jeremy is
No,
the
Jeremy
neighbor.
was the neighbor.
Was
Okay,
the neighbor.
Yeah, the brother and Jeremy are both, to me, and the other books, does she talk about those people?
There's some that like the brother definitely comes up again. Yes, but and like the depth of like understanding, like nothing's focused exclusively on him. I think the most in depth we like of the other three books, the most in depth we get about the brother is in the second one, which is Anything is Possible. So he plays a bigger role in one of the stories.
And the sister?
Don't make me do my presentation for next week already.
I just found that she mentioned these characters and then she never mentioned them again. It's kind of a thing.
But this is it, is that she does.
Like,
So
it's
this
like,
is,
it's
I
like,
mean,
I think she said,
but this is the story of our lives, right? Is that like or of anyone's life or of any book, like there are always more stories to tell. There are always more stories to tell because you're not like, none of us are the only characters in our stories. None of us have only like, our perspectives are not the only ones that matter, are not the only ones that may reflect on what is like, just to get all philosophical about a truth, what actually happened, what's like, it's to go into each different character, that would be, a series of, 400 books, to learn more
can I
about.
just ask a question? Jeremy was walking in the street because he was wearing his mother's, who was the one that was wearing the high heels?
The brother.
The brother, yeah.
Brother.
Her brother was cross-dressing at home, and it made her like, when she lived in New York City, they went to Gay Pride Parade, then she saw drag queens and everyone down the street. That's when she remembers that to us. That's when she remembers that incident to us.
Why does she choose to write about all these characters from her perspective? Why does she not give them each their own book?
Well, I think that, I mean, I can't really answer the why of that because I'm not her.
So I haven't read the
that's,
others, but that's what she does, right? In the other books, she's just writing it from her.
No. So in My Name is Lucy Barton, like the entire narrative is told from Lucy Barton's perspective.
Right.
So there's so much that's unsaid because of things she doesn't know, or like whatever.
So why don't they say it with their own words in their own book?
Well, that would maybe be a different book. So this is in Anything is Possible. Anything is Possible is a collection of short stories. So in Anything is Possible, they're all told from the different stories are told from different people's perspectives. One of the stories is told from Lucy Barton's perspective, focus kind of on her. One of the stories is, do you remember the janitor that she talks about? The janitor at the school. So when she was a kid, she would go to the school and she would stay late because they had heat, they had books, and she didn't have any of that stuff. So one of the stories is told from his perspective, and it has very little to, if nothing, to do with her.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's this character. Or there's another story in Anything is Possible that like, again, it's a character that she mentions in passing in Lucy Barton. She talks about someone whose husband came back from Vietnam and was a changed man. Well, there's a story that's told from his perspective. So this is, I mean, we can't get Elizabeth Strout and Lucy Barton too confused with each other. They're different people, right? So it's just that this particular book that we're reading, the narrative is all Lucy Barton.
Right.
And so, yes, and it is written in the first person, whereas others of her books, like, so this was her 5th novel, and it was the first one that she wrote from a first person perspective. So from an
Which
I.
one did she get the Pulitzer Prize for? I think she won a
Olive
Pulitzer.
Kitteridge.
And that is about?
It's about a woman called Olive Kitteridge.
Ah, so she completely, there's no Lucy Barton involved in that. 'Cause
No.
I have to start reading. Oh, I see.
No. So
That's
it's
interesting too.
yeah, and
She's
it's
amazing.
so it's told, like, it's funny because in Olive Kitteridge, it's told similarly but different. Different in that it's third person perspective. So it's always you know, this person did whatever, as opposed to I, or but at the same time, its structure is a little similar. So it's not a linear narrative. It's told in little vignettes, sort of in a similar way to My Name is Lucy Barton, except that with My Name is Lucy Barton, the vignettes are strung together in a, like, with the kind of cohesiveness of it being like from those 5 days in the hospital and the things that she remembered and the things that she remembers. And also being told from her perspective, as like, it really is, I can understand how it can be confusing because it does bounce back and forth in time.
Why did she have a Jewish doctor?
Why not?
Is that a stereotype kind of thing? Like, that sort of like hit me like, what, Jewish
Mhm.
doctor? What do you think? Anybody have any suggestions? That really,
Very, very compassionate.
oh,
Maybe.
that's good. I like that.
Well,
Yeah.
he's like the best, like he's like the goddish character in the book, right? He's the nicest, most wonderful, most
And
compassionate,
he's
most
Jewish.
patient.
Jewish.
Yes.
And he's not at the Jewish general, believe me.
Oh, Carol.
Was the janitor black? I don't know. Like, it's a horrible thing to say, but are things stereotyped? Like, I'd love to know that,
Well, she never mentions.
No,
So this is
no.
it, is that, like, you're free to imagine. This is something with a lot of what's going on in the book, is that you're free to imagine what's,
Mhm.
like, what's beyond. So to answer the question conclusively would be kind of impossible to do. I don't think the janitor is black, because I
Mhm.
feel like growing up where she did, when she did, that
She
would have
wouldn't have
been
had the
something
racial.
that would have been something that would have been noted in the town that she grew up in, especially in the way that
Mhm.
she and her family were treated as trash. I feel like that would have already, like, that would have come up. But I don't know. But we've talked before about, again, different interpretations. So I think I told you all once before about an audiobook that I had read, where I had pictured the neighbor character as Jewish, I think. And then when I listened to it on audiobook, she was Italian, or else it was vice versa. And it was very jarring because it was never
Mhm.
explicitly said one way or the other what this person's ethnicity was. But at the same time, it came out. Or else when we discussed, when our group discussed Written in Silk, what was that book? Carrie Estes. It was, the author is Carrie Estes, I think, and it was something about Written in Silk. But there was a character in that I hadn't read at all as being Jewish, and someone else, it might have been you, Roseanne, who talked about how blatantly the girl who wrote in Silk, that's what it was, how blatantly stereotypically Jewish this person was, and it was offensive. And I hadn't even, when I read it, I didn't even read the character as being Jewish. So this is like, different people's interpretations, different histories, different,
Coming
like
from
all
your
of
own
these
life
things.
experiences, coming from, like, I would look at it differently. It's true, coming from your own. That's very, very interesting about when you read a book. You're coming to it from your own perspective. And that's why I find some people read the same book and they get completely different thing out of it. Where, you know, and it's not fair to judge. Like, they're coming from their perspective and their life experiences. And
Well,
that's
because
the way they.
and it's happened so often, right? Where especially like this group in particular, right? We come together and we start talking about a book, and one of
We're a
us hated
great
it,
group. What a
and one
great
of us,
group we are. We're a great book group. I've been in a lot. This one is amazing. All of them, all of you. I think so. And you,
that's,
Katie, well,
and I
one of a
love
kind.
hearing the different perspectives. And
Mm.
like, it's because it broadens our sort of attempts at understanding like human nature, what's like what it is
We
that
haven't
makes
heard
us.
the other perspectives. We're just where are they? Where are the other people? Where's Carol? What do they think of what the book is?
Yeah, I'd like to know too.
Go ahead, Carol Rabinovich.
I tried to read it months ago in another book review. I did not like it. I was not going to read it again.
What
I
didn't
just
you
want-
like about it?
It was draggy. It was like sad. It was, I'm reading these thrillers. I'm reading light stuff like The Remarkable Creatures, light stuff, entertaining. Yeah. When we left Cuba, I think I talked about that one.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of, even though it's fiction, could have been based on a true story. So I like that. And this just didn't talk to me. So same thing with Olive Kitteridge. I think that was another book that was from another, and again, she's not my type of author.
So this is something that we don't always talk, when we're in a group, we don't always talk about pacing. So this is something that, again, different people will have different deal breakers sort of thing with books. Some of them, so this goes back years and years and years with a conversation I had with a colleague I worked with in a bookstore, as like he talked about the difference between a good story and good writing. So those are not the same thing, right? Like good writing and a good story are different things, but also pacing. So like sometimes some people can read a fast-paced book, like a page turner, and other people can read like the slow sort of like when is like Ann Tyler, I find slow pace. Yes, I definitely find Elizabeth Strout tends to write slower paced books. Alice Munro, definitely slower paced. And sometimes it's about the pacing. It's not necessarily about whether the story itself, it's the story ends up becoming secondary because the pacing doesn't work for you.
I agree with Carol. I took a large print book because they sent it to me. So I knew it was a short book. And I'll tell you the truth, if it had been 100 pages longer, I wouldn't have gotten past page 20 because I would have been bored out of my mind. Oh, here we go. An abused woman doesn't really go into the details, but we can't figure it out. And abused parent, a parent, you know what? I don't know. And then you find out you won a Pulitzer Prize. I hope it was a better book. But now Carol tells me I'm not going to bother with that book. But I agree with you. Maybe it's the pacing, but I found it, to be honest with you, very childish.
Wow.
You know, like I thought I was listening to a little girl just talking about, his mother, and then she stopped talking because I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to make some mother upset. And I thought I was talking, I thought she was a teen.
Wow, I disagree 100%, Roseanne.
Okay. That's 100%.
You found it cringe. You found it cringeworthy almost. You found it cringeworthy almost.
Not cringeworthy. It was babyish. I don't know. It's like, okay, let's not talk about something else. Let's turn the page, and then half a page, and then another half page. I don't know. Just I read it. I didn't want to give up, but I only read it because it was short.
I think I like the reason why I disagree 100% on it being your perspective on that it's childish is I think it takes a lot of maturity to recognize the ways in which, like, you're trying to analyze and recognize your relationships with your parents,
I think you better
especially
ask
in
your
a,
children that. Ask your children. They're very acute. They're very, they can figure out when they have to stop talking most of the time. Ask them. It's just interesting. You're talking about a parent perspective, but a lot
no,
of
I'm
times,
talking about my perspective as myself as a child.
well, but
Or
but
I'm talking
she's
about her perspective as her relationship with her parents as a child. Like her mother, in a way, I feel is more childish because her mother just doesn't make any of the questions, doesn't ask any of the questions, doesn't
That's
want to
right.
face any of the uncomfortable truths. Whereas she's forcing herself throughout this book to actually look
Okay,
at,
but
to examine those things.
she's a bigger child than her mother. I'm just saying that the whole thing that I don't know, just found it was just little snippets here, snippets there, and there was. If you had a question about the brother or the sister, you didn't get it. You just I don't know. I just found it very short, and I
But
would
do you
love to
find that
know
in
how
life,
they
if you have
edited
a
it.
question about something, that it gets answered, especially about someone else's motivations?
Say again.
Do you find that, like, if you are like, oh, why did someone do this thing, that it's pretty easy to figure out? Or do you think that it takes, like the thing is
No,
that
it's
we don't
hard. I
get
mean,
these answers, right?
that's right. You don't. But she kept saying, "I'm going to close."
But that's what you want
but-
from the books that you read, that you like.
Yeah.
You want
And
the
I-
answers.
yeah. Well, I'd love to know who edited this book. It must have been amazing, because this is a very hard book to edit it, the way they were doing by the chapters and I whoever edited this book deserved the Pulitzer Prize more. It's hard.
It's an interesting way to approach a story, for sure. And this is
Yeah.
something that, again, like Carol mentioned, Carol Rabinovich mentioned with Olive Kitteridge, like, it's not linear. It goes back and forth, but there is like a reason behind why they organize it the way they do. So in a similar way to write visual art, of like why someone chooses to depict something in an unrealistic way, or like they make this guy, green instead of blue, or whatever. Like, there are reasons behind it that may not be completely apparent and don't even necessarily need to be understood by the viewers or the readers, so much as it is like it shifts our perspectives on things.
Is there anybody else here online that is I don't know, I don't know how to do the scrolling, whatever, but besides Carol and us, is there anybody new who hasn't opened the mouth?
Well, Helen hasn't
know what
mentioned anything yet. Helen, hello.
I wish that there was more about her father. There was just this little bit, and he was horrible, and then in the next little bit, well, maybe not, maybe wasn't, and that's it. And that was frustrating.
Yeah, there's very, like, the bits of her dad seems like he's got a couple of big novels that could be written from his perspective, right? So he comes back from World War II, again, changed man. And how was he before? We're not told. We're only told a little bit about, like, these little snippets about what she remembers about him from her childhood, and then what he's like when she meets him again 9 years later. She wouldn't have recognized him, she says. He was just a stranger. She didn't feel the resentment, the shame, any of that, the anger that she had previously always associated with him when she sees him. And she flies back again to see him on his deathbed. But the other thing too that's interesting there is that she also mentions a little bit about her childhood, where it seems like it's unclear again who was the more abusive parent, whether it was the father or the mother, but she doesn't seem to have that gray area or that dislike for her mother. It's all focused on her father. And some of that from this book seems like it's partly because of, it's almost like, I feel like a lot, or my reading of it anyway, was that a lot of it is wrapped up in his humiliation of her brother from that one scene that we have where he marches the brother down the street after he's caught cross-dressing and he beats him. And then afterwards, he's very tender, right, with the brother. Do you remember this? He's very tender with the brother and like cradles his head while he's crying. But there's a lot that's unknown about the father. I agree.
I mean, didn't you get the feeling that the mother was an abused mother, like emotionally abused from the father, like maybe she wasn't strong enough?
I didn't.
Yes,
Oh, yes,
and maybe
I-
that's where and
I
that's
didn't.
where
I felt like
saying
she
the
and
thing-
I felt like
she
she
kept
and he
saying
were
the thing.
equally. Yeah. The thing which was him masturbating around the house, right? But
how
I
does the
got,
mother put up with this? You know, I mean, the daughter, is there some sort of like, why did you let this happen? Like, I think that sort of like came through.
What was the thing? You notice she wrote it in italics. What was the thing?
the thing was
Yeah,
him
yeah.
masturbating. The
And
thing
what did
was
the wife
him
do?
masturbating.
It was in the end? You're kidding me. That was that, because she mentioned that about somebody else did it, and she remembered it, but had a feeling that was it, that he walked around the house masturbating.
He lost control of
thing?
himself. Yeah.
Katie, I have to leave. Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Carol,
Bye,
great to
everybody.
see you.
See you soon.
Yeah, same
Bye.
here.
And I'm
Bye,
leaving
everybody.
too.
Okay.
Both
Okay.
Carols are signing off.
Bye,
Thank you.
That's
Carol.
To continue.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Great discussion. Thank you. Sorry that there's this thing in Ottawa.
I
that
gotta
wanted
go
to watch.
too.
Not at all. Take
Yeah.
care.
Okay.
Bye,
thanks.
Roseanne.
Katie, was there some non-respect for her mother, for, you know, like that? Was there ever, you know, like, why did you, you know, why didn't you do anything like that? Came through a little bit, you know. I don't know
See,
if
I
anybody
felt
else
though,
felt
like,
the same.
I felt like it was, see, I might be getting confused again with between this book and her other books.
When you
But
read
like,
the others, of course.
so this is, but I feel even when I read it the first time, the way that her mother is kind of cold and unresponsive to a lot of things.
Right.
I didn't think of that like she still seemed strong, like kind of strong and hard, you know, like there's this and I think it can be sometimes generational, this idea that we don't talk about that, like to examine something, right, that already
Right.
happened. We don't talk about that because it's over now. So we just don't talk about it.
Right, of
But
course.
when you don't talk about it and don't think about it, then of course you don't have any way of looking at seeing how that may affect your behavior, how that may like
It stays inside
kind
you
of
and affects
continue
you
on.
the rest of your life.
So I understand that a little bit just from, you know, conversations with like my grandmother was like that, for example, right? It's just like if there was something sort of traumatic that happened, and of course there were lots of traumatic things that happened, it's just like, and we don't talk about that.
That's exactly
Full
it.
stop.
That's exactly
And I
it,
think that's
yeah.
how a lot of people deal with trauma. Now, as to the mother and whether or not she was abused, I wouldn't say that she wasn't, but I never got the impression that it was from her husband. I thought that that was more like, again, leftover or carried over from childhood. I think the way that she parented, again, this lack of like this inability to say, I love you, this inability to support her daughter in any way. Like there's a scene where she talks to her daughter about, or she doesn't talk to her about it, but when Lucy Barton starts to develop, right? When she starts to develop breast, she compares her like in this kind of, I read it as like kind of a sickened sort of way to like, oh, like the cow's udders and it's like there's no compassion. Like at no point do I read any compassion from the mother. The only times that I see compassion from the mother are when she's in the hospital, that she comes.
But the mother came from this kind of a home, and married this kind of a you know, which also is you know, like she married the same kind of, you know, that's what I'm saying. She didn't move out of what she had at home, you
Which
know, and
again begs the question that Helen brought up too about what kind of dad, like what is the dad like? What is he like? Because again, I think of them as being, I really like in my mind, they're practically twins, these parents. Like I
Mhm.
feel like they came from similar backgrounds and
Exactly.
they came like, and then they raised their children in like a way that worked for them, I guess. Like, but that of this like where silence and just duty, you know, as opposed to love and empathy, figure more strongly in the upbringing. And I don't know, like that's like with all of these questions, like Roseanne brought up as well, right? All these questions. So like, why did they have children? That's a question. Why did they have children? I mean, part of it, of course, is that
What
family
was the
planning.
mother's reaction to the father walking the brother down the street, like humiliating him? Did we ever get an idea of that?
Not like, not that I can pinpoint exactly. My recollection of it is
Didn't
just
say
like,
anything
again,
about
it's
that.
just like, yep, that's what you get.
That's the
Like,
way,
I feel
yeah.
like a lot of her perspective was just a kind of dismissive. Like
Mhm.
all of the memories of her mother from her childhood seemed kind of on par to the dad's. But again, I might be conflating stories here. Yeah, I didn't see a basis for this affection that like one of the reviews that I'd read about this book was written by Claire Massoud, who is another author, and I probably mispronounced her name. And it was in the New York Times. She wrote about, she thinks she said this almost animal love that that Lucy Barton has for her mother. And I would take out the almost. It's like it's an animal like love that she seems to have for her mother because there seems to be no reason for it. You know, like
Mhm.
why do you,
Yeah, exactly.
where is this coming from? What's prompting this kind of loyalty? Because it doesn't seem like we've mentioned before, like her mother did much to protect her, to
No
support her,
nurturing.
to encourage her,
True.
any of it. And the father either, but the father doesn't have that degree of loyalty from Lucy Barton that the mother does. And why is that?
Possibly it comes down to the stereotypes of the daughter next to the mother, and that's, you know, no matter my mother right or wrong sort of thing. Like
Mhm.
I despite the fact that she's a total bitch and has absolutely no feelings.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, right? Is that the mother has no feelings. Now, it could be that they're just so suppressed, right? And repressed or whatever. And the same as with the dad. But the dad, even in the short periods of time that he's mentioned in the childhood, he seemed more human to me than the mother did. Because the father seemed broken to me when I was reading it. It's that like
Mhm.
there's like clearly there were some breaks, there were some cracks, there was some like, but he showed more like there were more extremes in behavior. And yeah, maybe it's because maybe she feels this loyalty to her mother because it's gendered, right? Like 'cause she, you know, knew that she
Nurturing.
would be growing up into a mother or an adult woman anyway at some point, whereas she didn't feel like she could identify with the same things that her dad went through or lived because she couldn't. I don't know. But she seems to have, as an adult, a lot more compassion, like a lot of compassion for men and women when she's looking at them, like when she's talking about them.
I came away from this book thinking I have to read those other four, I think that's a must. If you really, you have to read her other books to get the full, more fuller picture, I think.
The breadth. And I mean,
Yes.
this is it with everything, right? Like when we read, I am glad that you liked it. I do like it
I
as well.
loved it.
But I can also understand people having problems with it. And I do
Mhm.
like having the discussions about it. I'm sorry that Carol and Roseanne left.
Wonderful.
Because it
But it's
is,
what we're talking about, coming from your own life experience and your own, that's what you see, you come from your, it could be very personal and if nobody needs to know, but that's what it is. It really, like, even with me, my perspective, I never had a great relationship with my mother. And so I come from it from a different, where somebody else would say, or somebody has not a good relationship with their child and doesn't like the way the child thinks about them, they all come, and then this just, well, it's just too close. I don't want to know about it. It's silly, but you can't judge. This is the way people feel, and that's what reading a book is all about. It's very interesting. I find reading, it can just jar you. It's too personal. It's too this, it's too that. That's the beauty of reading, that it just opens your eyes to life and your life and everybody else's,
And I definitely think we need to like leave the door open for yeah, if you didn't like it, you didn't like it, and okay. But I do think, I agree that I think that there's a lot to talk about, and partly that's because there are a lot of questions and a lot of unanswered questions, right? So another thing that I'm curious about with this book, this story, is that the mother seems like she is really acting out of character when she comes. So
right?
in several ways, right? One, I think one of the reasons why Lucy Barton, why it means so much to her, is because it is out of character. Her mother comes and stays with her for 5 days. And even if she doesn't talk about,
did her mother come out of guilt?
so first she comes.
So.
Second of all, she's very independent, very proud. That comes across, right? But she accepts a plane ticket from William to get flown in. Okay, that's also kind of odd, right? It seems out of character for the mother. That she then leaves as suddenly as she came, that to me was a little bit more in keeping. But that she stays for 5 days, essentially like holding a vigil with Lucy.
I think she came because she had to come. She felt she had to come. I don't really think it was coming from all that wonderful place, because if it would have, then she would have had a long talk with her and so on. I think she came.
I don't know. Maybe she didn't know how.
Yeah. She knew she should be there because her daughter's in the hospital, but I don't think it was all coming from the real reason why she should have been there.
But the other thing too is that she was in the hospital when she had her kids, and the mother never came. There's no talk of the mother seeing the Chrissy and Becca. There's no mention of that.
Guilt at her, she knows, but that's what's so fabulous about the book. Like, you just, I loved it. I got to read the others.
So
Helen, you keep lighting up. Sorry, what's that? Helen, go ahead.
Mother talks about here and there. She mentions that she has vision. So maybe she came to assure herself that her daughter would make it through this illness. That she seems to have some sort of otherworldly powers.
Right.
Because she says that a few times. I always know.
I forgot about the visions. You're right.
So maybe that's it. So she wasn't sure and that's why she stayed awake all the 5 days. And then when she leaves, I think she says something about, "You'll be fine now."
You're right. It is very abrupt. It's interesting that she has this, sorry?
No, go ahead.
It's
I just
interesting.
wondered, do you think that she thought her daughter was gonna die?
Yeah. I think so.
Or maybe just that she wasn't sure, or like that it was like one of her visions that were not meant, like we're not told about. Again, these things that we're not told.
And
No,
there's so many things, you just keep going, you know?
yeah, that's great, Helen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, we
That's
the only ones left here.
We are the
I could
only
talk
ones
about
left.
this all day. I loved it. I love books like this. These are the kind of books that you really should be reading, you know, I just loved it. I really did. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to say next week. But how am I going to read 4 books in a week?
You don't have to read them all. I know that when we started doing these book discussions, it was a book review, and then so it was sort of this rotation that I was doing. It was a book review, and then it was a traditional book club, and then it was a read what you want or something like that. And one of the reasons why I stopped doing book reviews, one, I think you guys maybe sometimes zoned out a little bit during the book reviews, because I did review Remarkably Bright Creatures like a year ago. But
I wasn't here. I wish I was. Just kidding. Yeah.
but the other thing too is that to prepare a book review takes a lot of time, because you have to read multiple books and then, or well, for me, my book reviews are usually with multiple books. So it's not just in-depth talking about one book. And also I personally prefer to have the traditional book club when it's about one book, because I really like hearing other people's perspectives. I really like it, even though it probably doesn't always seem that way. I like it when people disagree with me. I like it when someone hates a book that I loved, or I mean, it's happened more than once where we've had one of these traditional book reviews or book clubs, and I've hated the book, but I usually don't say that. Because I think, I don't know why I don't say it, but oftentimes it's happened where I'm like, and it wasn't my cup of tea. But at the same time, again, it's coming from a different perspective for me, because I have like studied books in different ways, that whether or not it's something that I like is not necessarily indicative to me of whether or not it's good. Because there are lots of great books that I didn't like.
You're so much more knowledgeable than we are about books and structure and authors and everything. Like, you know, people should learn from you. That's what I feel. They should learn that, and that's what I get from you. Like, learn what to look for in a book and learn.
But this is what I love about our traditional book clubs is I like learning from you guys, because again, we're all of us stuck in our own heads, right? This is one of the reasons why we read, is to get out of our heads a little bit, but we're still influenced by our perspectives and our biases and all of that stuff. And when we hear other people describe, so like this is why too I poke people, right? When they say I didn't like it, I want to know why. I want to know what it is about it, because again, that gives you an idea of, you know, like what else maybe that person is looking for, or else like maybe for me of like what kind of book to choose next time, so that there's again more of a balance.
That everybody's going to like the same book. What are the odds on that? I mean, we're 5 or 6 or 7 people, and nobody likes every book. You imagine if you're 50 people. I mean, it's impossible. You're never going to achieve that.
Agreed entirely. And this is that I think that the benefit of this kind of thing is not, oh yes, we all really liked it, don't we all have wonderful taste?
And then we'd have nothing to talk about. If everybody loved the book the exact same way, then we'd all go home in 10 minutes. What's the point, you know?
And
it's again, good to hear. I found it very interesting when I think it was Carol that I didn't like it. I did and I agree with you. Why didn't you like it? And she has every reason to say why she didn't like it, and I want to hear why. And she's right from her point of view and different from my point of view. That's what it is.
Yeah, and with Roseanne too, right? Like that's part of, sorry, part of the the interesting thing too of why she didn't like it. And she found the characters really childish, and
Mhm.
I find that
That's
baffling.
interesting.
But I would have liked it to hear more of the why. But that was probably my fault too, in that I talked over her instead
No,
of.
no, you didn't
But
talk over.
but this is
You-
it. This is the discussion part. I like the discussion part.
Anyway, I'm gonna have to go to this, can go on forever. Who's left? Helen and me and you. That's
That's
it?
it.
Well,
That's
I
the
loved
last
it.
three
I
standing.
love every part of your book club. I think you are phenomenal. And I belong to 2 others, and this is my favorite. And I'm definitely coming next week. And I have to read 4 books in 1 week, and that's
You
your fault.
don't. I'm just going to talk about them. You can read them all after. I will try not to give any big
Okay.
spoilers. I'm just going to talk about them sort of more in context.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to it. Make sure we get that email.
I will.
Bye, Helen.
Bye.
Helen,
Bye.
thank you so much for coming too. I really appreciate your perspective as well, because I think that like this was something that was really, I was like, why is she acting so out of character? And I don't remember her saying at any point explicitly that the mother had a vision, but that
was
like
interesting.
when you
I
bring
found
that up,
out-
I'm like, oh.
Yes, that I didn't realize that either. That I want to read it again.
As a
go to the part
possibility.
of I want to read it again. Yeah. Terrific. That's why you also want to read the book again after you hear everybody, you know, that's
But
what it
maybe
is.
like give it some time to again change your perspective for
You
what
think
to
I
read.
should read Wuthering Heights again?
I think Wuthering Heights is always worth a reread, but maybe not immediately.
I'm gonna do it so I can feel the way you do. Thanks, sweetie. I'll see you Wednesday.
See you
Bye.
Wednesday.
Bye,
Take care,
Helen.
Rona. Thank you, Helen, for coming. I'm gonna end.